The gate guard's badge caught the morning sunlight, gleaming as though polished for ceremony, but the moment someone stamped the visitor's pass denied, it became a weapon. Malcolm Hayes stood still outside the base. He had once protected uniform folded in his arms, medals faintly glinting through the fabric. A man invisible where he should have been honored. "Your ID's expired," said the guard, voice flat as the desert sky behind him. No understanding in his tone. No echo of gratitude. Just procedure. Minutes ago, a different reality had existed. Malcolm, the Bronze Star recipient, Vietnam veteran, silent hero, who'd carried more secrets than medals, had been a guest, welcomed in this very compound. 10 minutes later, after one email with words like unverified and policy breach, he was barred from stepping foot where he once had breathed freely. He folded his posture, kept quiet. His uniform bore the weight of history, yet now it felt like a shroud. The world didn't expect veterans to be barefoot, alone at the gates. Their valor wasn't supposed to expire at retirements or retirement letters. Malcolm's name echoed through corridors he hadn't walked in decades. He'd given that base everything brothers lost, battles fought, whispered prayers in bunkers without faith. But the computer system didn't know that. The paperwork didn't list sacrifice. It listed dates, fireworks codes, and whether your retirement pocketed your corners. He stared straight ahead, breathing the scent of dust and pine and memory. The base soldiers behind the guard held their distance. None intervened. Not one recognized the graying hair and the firm set of Malcolm's jaw that was known to few outside those war-worn nights. He didn't protest, didn't snap, didn't ask for explanations. Just reached into his pocket past the medals, the prints, the ID, and pulled out a photograph. Malcolm in his prime, lean and sure with rifle slung, a boy beside him smiling in school uniform. "We love you, Dad," scrawled on the edge. He handed it through the gate grate. The guard tucked it into his pocket without looking up. Malcolm nodded once, turned, and began walking away. Each step was deliberate, stronger than guilt, deeper than bitterness. He didn't always conform to loneliness. He had joined the Marines at 17, a boy chasing belonging, a boy who needed structure. They gave him family, brotherhood, and war. He had seen friends fade into sand, had sewn uniforms stained with grief, had held a tie-contracted child quiet when the bullets came too close. His hands had known weight rifles, helmets, dog tags, but nothing weighed more than the nights spent awake in cold foxholes, listening for the echoes of loss. He'd come home changed, haunted, honored, trying to translate cannon fire into PTA meetings and parades into grocery store appearances. He tried, but the world moved, and he felt like he was in half-stepped rhythm with it. Yet he volunteered, tutored at-risk kids, picked up trash on highways, donated hours at veteran clinics. He never wore his uniform outside, only in parades or funerals because once they marched for him. Now they didn't know him, so when he gazed at that barred gate, uniform folded in his arms, medals veiled behind cloth, and the cold distance of security closing in, he didn't flinch. He just felt the history of every denied smile and every silent patrol that no one noticed. He arrived home, dust and disappointment in the fabric of his coat, expecting casual pity. When the knock came, he sat at his gray kitchen table and braced for the corporate letters. He opened the door. There stood a man in dress uniform, rank insignia shining like a promise. "Colonel Grant," he said. Malcolm blinked. The colonel didn't smile. "I came because they said you were here," he said, steady, calm, urgent. Malcolm didn't invite him in. The colonel didn't step forward. "I know you were banned," the colonel said. "I'm sorry." No explanation, just apology. Malcolm's mouth stayed closed. Some moments are meant to stay silent. Malcolm leaned back against his kitchen door frame, body cool where the uniform hadn't pressed tight against his skin for years. Colonel Grant stared at him from the doorstep, unarmed, unaccompanied, carrying only an envelope with the base insignia. In that stillness, the unspoken question roared, "Why had he come? You earned that place." The colonel said, voice firm but gentle, "Not with paperwork or dates, but with every step you took for this country and this community." Malcolm's fingers curled around the envelope, heavy now with meaning, yet light as air. He didn't reach for it, didn't open it. A flicker of understanding passed through his thoughts like a silent salvo fired at injustice. He whispered, "They don't know." The colonel nodded, as if he had carried that same burden. Neither spoke until the sound of traffic faded behind them, until an afternoon breeze stirred the curtains. Then he opened the envelope. Inside was a temporary access card, restricted, but enough. "Come back," said Colonel Grant. And Malcolm did. The ride back was silent. The colonel spoke only to mention the roads or the weather. Their arrival was understated, just two clean sedans pulling into the base drive. No ceremony, no photographers. No press. They walked together, Colonel Grant in step, Malcolm walking behind, uniform draped over his arm, medals folded. Inside, the base seemed to hold its breath. A guard at the gate looked past Malcolm, stared at the uniform, hesitated. Colonel Grant stepped forward, placed a hand on Malcolm's shoulder. "This is Staff Sergeant Hayes," he said to the surprised young guard. "He's welcome here." The uniform was disbelief turned inward, felt more than seen. They walked past the same cafe, where whispers followed. But this time eyes didn't glare, they softened. Hushed conversations drifted, ones of regret, humility. Nothing was said to Malcolm, no apologies delivered, no penance demanded. He simply moved through the corridor, calm and silent. And that silence, now wrapped in belonging, echoed louder than any words could. That evening, Colonel Grant cleared the base auditorium for a private meeting. Staff, soldiers, counselors, a few guests from local veteran groups. Malcolm stood at the back, still silent, still steady. Colonel Grant walked to the podium and said, "Today, we recognize a man who defended us in silence and who deserved to be defended just as quietly." He paused. Every head nodded, not in shame but in respect. Malcolm stepped forward then, no fanfare, no praise. Just himself stepping into sight, he spoke softly. "Silence is powerful, but sometimes acknowledgement, quiet, simple acknowledgement, is stronger," and the room nodded again. That night Malcolm left the base with Colonel Grant again. Their way out was quiet, but now the path didn't feel cold. The base wasn't a fortress he'd defended, he was home again. Sometimes standing still isn't surrender. It's reclaiming what was never yours to lose. The next morning, Malcolm walked onto the base, not as a visitor, but as one of its silent guardians again. He passed saluting troops, nodded to nurses in scrub colors, and acknowledged a few civilians with the faintest of smiles. He carried no speech, no announcement, just the quiet fact that he belonged. In the courtyard, a plaque gleamed on a new stone pedestal. Words etched in bronze declared, "In honor of Staff Sergeant Malcolm Hayes, for his service and for reminding us that belonging outlives bureaucracy." No voices rose. No applause, only reflective gazes directed toward his reflection on its surface. His hand hovered above the plaque, trembling not with anger, but with relief. Colonel Grant stood beside him, silent as well, then whispered, "They did it." Malcolm nodded more to the air than the person beside him. No words required, dignity re-established. Weeks later, a community picnic hosted by the base drew families and local residents. Children laughed, balloons swayed. Veterans shared quiet conversations on folding chairs. The scent of grilled meat and the gentle hum of small talk filled the air. Malcolm sat at the picnic table with a young lieutenant, someone who barely knew him. The lieutenant poured soda into Malcolm's cup and said simply, "Thank you." It wasn't programmed or prompted, just genuine. Malcolm met his eyes and nodded, soft smile tucked into the edges of his mouth. "I shouldn't have needed to be banned," Malcolm said quietly. The lieutenant looked confused. For them to show up, Malcolm clarified and tapped his jacket. "But you did," the lieutenant nodded. "We knew." And in that moment, the future stretched ahead, not in medals or parades, but in quiet acknowledgement and shared respect. Months later, the base's training center doors held Malcolm's name on a plaque. The Malcolm Hayes Training Center. New recruits passed it daily, unaware of the man's history. But one day, a group of recruits hesitated, reading the name aloud. They asked a senior NCO, "Who was Malcolm Hayes?" The NCO replied, "A man who defended us before we knew we needed defending. Learn why, then walk with honor." At sundown, Malcolm stood sentinel at the training center's threshold, uniform pressed once more not for ceremony, but out of habit. In the golden light, his medals caught the warmth of forgiveness and purpose. He didn't look for crowds. He didn't expect praise, but families leaving the center, wives, children, veterans, paused, offered respectful nods, and stepped forward into pride instead of shame. That evening, Colonel Grant walked out onto the porch of the staff residence. There sat Malcolm, quietly tending to a small garden box, planting small flowers. Not as decoration, but symbols. Colonel Grant sat beside him. "Why flowers?" he asked. Malcolm touched the soil gently, then the blossoms. "Because hope isn't loud. It grows." Colonel Grant nodded. "You taught us that." Malcolm's gaze held the soil, the blooms, the night beyond. Silence, accompanied by purpose, outlives every decree. They sat together, in quiet, two soldiers understanding that peace sometimes comes not from ending conflict, but from claiming rightful place quietly, resolutely, dignified. In a world quick to judge and quick to ignore, Malcolm Hayes taught us that honor doesn't need an audience. It lives in actions, remembered by those who stand when recognition calls. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? What does quiet reclaiming mean to you? Subscribe for stories that honor true silent heroes, the ones whose valor still echoes in places that forgot how to listen. Because sometimes the most powerful statements don't raise a voice, they restore a name.